From the nation's capital, this is the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast with your host, Rob Snowhite.
My name is Rob Snowhite, and this is the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast, episode number 260, featuring Ryan Hudson. And this podcast is brought to you by Corkers. Ryan is a fly fishing guide in Wyoming. In 2018, he wrote an article for a Wyoming newspaper titled, Fly Fishing Brand Ambassadors and Social Media, What Might They Be Doing to Your Fishery? The article has resurfaced on social media in the past few weeks, so I had called up Ryan again to find out more. This time, the audio recorded. We'll discuss the article, detrimental effects of targeting spawning brown trout, ramifications to social media users after posting these unethical images, BroStaffers, we'll talk about some travel, and one of the coolest stories I've heard in a while. For more on Corkers, visit corkers.com, and that's with a K. Corkers are my preferred brand of wading boots, and no other brand allows the angler to customize their traction with such a variety of options. They have felt sole, ideal for slippery aquatic environments where felt is allowed and studs aren't an option. Klingon sticky soles, ideal for use on land, in boats, and in less demanding wet wading conditions. Studded Klingon soles are ideal for extremely slippery aquatic environments where felt sole, again, is not an option. And finally, Klingon sticky soles, ideal for use on land, in boats, and in less demanding wet wading conditions. And after recording this with one take, let's go hear Ryan. We have Ryan Hudson. You want to introduce yourself and tell us who your celebrity doppelganger is?
Celebrity doppelgangers, locally known as Reif. And I'm the owner-operator, head guide of the Wyoming Fishing Company, LLC, out here in snowy western Wyoming on the upper Green River drainage, not to be confused with the Utah Green River. Same river, but I don't have anything to do with that and don't want nothing to do with it.
Are you a native to Wyoming?
Nope. Flatlander at heart from Missouri. Grew up fly fishing and tying flies. I started tying flies commercially when I was about 13 and graduated high school Saturday, and Monday I was in Wyoming pursuing what I didn't know would turn into a 17-year later guide career today.
How about that?
Yeah, it's been fun. Can't complain. You know, it's led to many good experiences and lots of good fishing.
So if we're going to throw a dart to your hometown in Wyoming, what's it called and where would it hit in western Wyoming?
Western central Wyoming. And we're about an hour and 10 minutes southeast of Jackson Hole, Wyoming there with the Tetons and whatnot, but try not to go there too much. It's a busy place. This area of Wyoming is the least populated county and the least populated state in the nation. So we definitely have our isolation, and that's kind of why I'm here. It's because it's not a lot of people and lots of good fishing.
That's fantastic. I'm quite jealous of that.
Yeah, well, I can't complain. You know, I've already been floating down the river here already this month, about a half dozen times, and fishing's been great.
So when the coronavirus comes here, I might be hanging out with you. Yeah. It's isolated.
Yeah. Although it may sound like I have it now, but I think we're good to go here in Wyoming. You know, it's the middle of nowhere. It's snowy, it's cold, it's windy. It's pretty awesome for anybody looking to pursue a life in the outdoors and recreation that follows.
So how did you become a professional fly fisherman once you got out there?
Well, I came out here and began running a couple of trips my first summer out of high school on the Snake River there in Jackson. And from there, you know, I ended up getting a residency here in Wyoming, which allowed me to pursue my education at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. And while I was there, I was able to further expand my guiding area to the Bighorn, the North Platte, as well as the Green and smaller tributaries. And I didn't know it at the time. I always joked about having the ideal clientele. That'd be the perfect job where I could just guide 100 days a year and make what I want to make and have fun and Didn't know it was possible until last few years. I'm kind of realizing it's happened as I've been internationally guiding Mongolia a couple times and started hosting some trips. I hosted a trip down in Bolivia with Angling Frontiers up in the Bolivian Amazon. I didn't go there with any booking agency. I went there with my own clientele, guys that I have built. Made for a really fun experience. Got to play cleanup behind them as the Dorado would crash the sow below, and made it a lot of fun. So kind of looking to pursue other destination fishing trips along with guiding around here and seeing what more this life has got to offer.
So if you're guiding right now, this is your slow season. Is this when you're normally going to be traveling?
Yeah, it's the slow season. Not a lot of travelers, but there's quite a few guys locally, whether it's Wyoming, Utah, or Colorado, that got a case of cabin fever real bad. I'll kind of hustle them up here usually every year by middle into January, and they're ready to go. I'm ready to go, and been tying flies all winter. So typically this time of year, it's all guys I've fished before. Matter of fact, the first trip I have every year is a guy in his mid-80s out of western Wyoming, a little further west of here. He's a neat old cowboy, and he shows up every year, rain or shine, whether it's snowing 2 to 5 inches or sunny, and we go out and we fish, have a great time, and so it's and then from there it kind of leads into the spring season of the pre-spawn fishing. And one thing we have a plethora of here is the Rocky Mountain whitefish, and they are of considerable size. We get a lot in that 16 to 19 inch range, and it's easy, and this is no joke, it's easy to catch 10, 20 an angler a day.
Now, the last episode, we heard how good those are on the grill.
They're good on the grill. Since the last episode, I've been pursuing them on the smokers. Matter of fact, that's what I'm doing today, smoking up some fish, and they eat really good. I've actually had some guys tell me that they prefer the smoked whitey I do over smoked trout. So being that the whitefish limit is 6 here in the Green River, you bang out 6 of those things in that 16, 20 inch range. And those are some pretty fat fillets. They certainly don't compare to the larger lake whitefish, but worthy fillets. And, it's such a plentiful resource that it'd be foolish not to at least try it. So
when eating fish out there, do you have to worry about glowing in the dark when you wake up as if you were going to eat fish out here?
Not that I know of. Only thing they talk about is mercury, but fortunately whitefish eat quite a bit of insects. So mercury levels are low in them. And, like I said, this is the least populated county in the state. Wyoming routinely holds that population of about 500,000 people. I think it's below 500,000 right now. So this county that I'm in, there's just not much here. There is quite a big natural gas field to the south of us. Haven't woke up glowing yet, I should say. So
that's fantastic. Good for you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So let's talk about some of the legalities of guiding and fishing in Wyoming, being that you can go to other states and guide and other people come to your state. And this will bring us into the article you wrote.
Well, Wyoming, it's one of the few states that doesn't require a guide license. Unlike Idaho, Colorado, or Montana that do, we do not. However, depending on what land you're utilizing when you are, on the clock per se with your clients, that's going to dictate what type of permitting you need. Now, whether that's federal or state. One thing that's actually happened here recently is I've kind of ruffled the feathers of our local legislator, and he feels the same, that there needs to be some sort of enforcement of our state lands around here, because every year you're supposed to, it's like a $250 fee to the state to use a lot of our state lands around here. But after we looked into it, we discovered that there's only 11 outfitters statewide that actually buy this permit. Being that we get a flood from guys all, whether it's Idaho or even Jackson or Colorado coming up here to guide, they're able to kind of fly under the radar and utilize those lands and bring their dudes on it, and not have to abide by any standard or professional certification or anything like that. Now, we do have some federal stuff here that does require permitting, but the enforcement on each of those lands doesn't really exist. The BLM claims they enforce stuff. I've never seen them. And I know they've actually said publicly that they busted me guiding illegally, which was pretty funny. I ended up finding the ranger who did it, and he admitted to not or being mistaken there. We got fish and wildlife land that's regulated pretty good. The national park is, the Bureau of Reclamation is, to this day, you're still required to get a permit to do it. However, it's still kind of the Wild West in that, they just collect their fees. And again, in 17 years, I've never been checked on BOR water. BLM water, I don't even think I've been checked on the BLM water either. It's just been the Fish and Wildlife and National Forest federal as well. And, they're pretty strict as well. But, we've got quite a bit of water around here. On our river here, we've got well over 100 miles that can be floated at any given time whenever it's thawed out, unlike right now. So you really got to kind of do your research and figure out where you're going and do some digging. One thing I've found with the state lands is that a lot of these older outfitters had no idea about the state permit that I was able to find out about right when I got out of college, because I wanted to do this legally. And as I see it getting abused more and more, these older outfitters are contacting me saying, "What are you talking about, the state lands permit? We've never heard of this. We've been in business for 20 years, blah, blah." I'm like, well, it's right there on their website. So I don't know what to tell you. So it's, and there's no book about how to do it. There's no tutorial. This is a unique business to run out here, whereas if you were in Colorado or Montana or even out east, where they require a licensing, it at least kind of points you in the right direction on what you need to do to be legit. Whereas here, I could just as easily not have insurance, not have any permitting, and being that I've never been checked, I could have easily been running a non-legit operation like a lot of outfitters do all around here. Never know the difference whether I was legal or not, because it's, we're just out here in the middle of nowhere, and the authorities have only so many resources to check such a vast area that it makes it challenging. And it's kind of turning into a situation where the guides are doing a fair amount of the policing or reporting, and that's one thing for us guys that are permitted on the particular water that has limited slots. You see somebody there, he's a guide, he's guiding, and you don't see the stickers on his boat. And it's like, well, I know I pay out my wazoo to be here legally, and this guy's just coming in poaching. Because if you think about it, it's easy for a guy to come out of Idaho, Montana, Colorado, Utah, bring his dudes up here, put them up at the Hampton in town, and not have to worry about a thing. Again, that you don't even have to show proof of insurance. So it turns into a pretty complex issue that just made it to the legislature last year. Started talking about it, and it sounds like as of last fall, a task force has been formed to do further researching on it this upcoming year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with potential guide legislation. I'm not a big guy on additional laws or rules. I just think we need to enforce the things that are on the books. And that's one thing that I know the state lands does not do. There's no enforcement of the state lands permit. So when they're asking you to pay $200, $300 a year, yet there's no enforcement, and there will be no enforcement, it's a bit disheartening, and it kind of makes you wonder if there's other options, if you know what I'm saying.
What about the legality of bringing out-of-state boats into Wyoming?
Well, if you're talking commercial or just recreational?
Either one.
Well, if you're bringing a boat from any other state, it has to be checked. It has, when you come to the port of entry, you got to stop, have it inspected. Wyoming is, to my knowledge, it is one of the only states that hasn't had any confirmed cases of aquatic invasive species. Whereas Colorado, I can tell you, Colorado is a high-risk state. Doesn't matter who you are. You come from Colorado with the boat, and you already get to bypass the standard inspection. You're already in the high-risk category because Colorado, doesn't, anybody knows what's Colorado's experience in the last 2-3 decades in terms of, invasive species. And it sounds like Montana, I thought Montana was off the list, but I believe I heard something that they had detected something up there. Idaho's got it. Utah, I believe Powell's got it, whether it's zebra mussels or, there's just a wide variety of invasives, whether it's plants, mussels, crayfish, fish. I know you guys got some interesting fish over there. That snakehead sounds like quite the fish. You could throw a streamer at it on the dry land, can't you? And it'll eat it.
I mean, I've never seen them on the land unless they've been thrown up there. Yeah, you bounce flies off their heads. They are already awake, I've been told. I had a person send me a note over, I guess maybe email 2 weeks ago, that they already saw them in one of the marshes that have boardwalks through it. It would be the greatest place to target snakeheads. However, they don't allow fishing. You'll have 3-foot fish an arm length away.
Oh, man.
And I would pay the county to let me go in there and throw some topwater frogs at them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe when I get a chance to come out to Fairfax, DC area, it'll be legal then, and you and I can go try it.
Absolutely. If you're fast enough, you can probably grab one.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Missouri, as I said, and bow fishing and spear fishing kind of runs deep in my blood. We don't get to do that too much here, and that sounds like a fun thing to do out there, but hard to say if they'll let that fly.
All right. Let's talk about spawning fish. You mentioned it earlier, the pre-spawn in the springtime. Let's go talk about fall spawning and some of the things you've seen other people's do, and what happens to brown trout once they're removed from their spawning areas.
Well, what I have seen personally, for one, starting from, my day at 8 or 9 a.m. when I meet my dudes, if we're fishing in the spring or the fall and I know we're going to see spawning fish, before the boat's in the water, that's something I make clear. I say, we're going to see some fish on gravel. I'm going to tell you to pull your flies in. You can observe them. Probably going to see some big ones, 24 to 30-inch fish. We won't fish to them. And I've actually lost clientele due to that. Not many, but I think some guys just want to come out and have an easy target, which they can be. So, during the spawn, I typically focus on the longer runs, the troughs. And usually when fish are spawning, whether it's browns or rainbows, you can always find cutties laid up looking for typically betas, because betas are hatching when browns and rainbows are on gravel. When the cutties are spawning, you've got browns and rainbows that are, the rainbows are typically done, although you'll see some of them in there, but there's plenty of other fish around the river and all sorts of water that are feeding actively that are, in my eyes, better or more appropriate to target. Now, what I see around here is I see a lot of guides coming in, and there's some that are targeting spawning fish, whatever. I mean, that's been happening since the beginning of time. Clearly, Alaska's built on pulling fish off of gravel, but that's a different scenario. You see those guides coming in, you see them post their dudes up in ankle-deep water. There's been times words have been exchanged, but you just kind of go on with your day because you see so much of it, and you just tell guys. And a lot of most guys I fish with, they get it, and if they don't get it, they get it by the end of the day. Why I don't do it. One thing, since I put that article out a few years ago, folks said I was jealous of the fame that Mr. Duke has gotten off of it, or who he is in general. I catch plenty of big fish with my dudes every year over that 24-inch range that aren't spawning. And for me, these fish, I don't know each one of them personally, obviously, but I like to call them my business partners. And, being that on the Green River, the browns are all wild. And I know over the years, the Game and Fish has reported the brown trout numbers are down. We don't know the brown trout number right now, but their population has historically been a little lower than preferred. Matter of fact, they've even considered stocking brown trout on the lower Green below the Fontenelle Dam stretch in recent years. They haven't done it. So when we're relying on a solely natural population to carry on the future generation for me and you and, our children to fish, targeting them when they're spawning, not a good thing. A lot of guys will tell you, well, we're catching them, we're bringing them in quick, letting them go, not taking them out of the water, everything's fine. Fine, that's fair. One thing a lot of people don't know about are two funguses that grow on fish, is that white kind of mold that you'll see on fish spawning. It's for the rainbows, it's typically the saprolegnia. For the brown trout, it is furuncinosis. And this is all facts. You can find it in, I believe it's got the book here, Parasites of Fishes in Wyoming by Douglas Mitchum. It's the Wyoming Game and Fish Department's handbook or one of the books that they refer to heavily. And it's scientific data that furuncinosis in particular, that is the one that the brown trout are susceptible to. It's typically fatal. Every year in the fall, I see 20 to 26 inch, big, beautiful dead males up on the bank, colored up. And this is the end of October, November, colored up. They got white mold growing all over them, as well as handprints. And some guys will even say, well, we just keep them in the net, and we let them go. Fine. But the stress of bringing them in promotes this type of growth on the fish. It allows them to be susceptible, especially when they're touched and that slime is removed. That is an open wound for this fungal infection to get in and start growing on their host. Now, the rainbows, that they get the sapolegnia, and I'm told that's not as fatal as furuncinosis. One thing about these two issues is that white mold is transmittable to the red or the eggs, and it has been known to kill the entire nest of eggs. So going back to what I was talking about just a second ago, well, if you're handling them, or if you're not handling them, you're bringing them in quick, letting them go, fine. But that additional stress, then the next guy comes in, he pulls that fish off or pulls the next fish off, rubs it, and they can transmit that disease. Bang, that disease is already on the adults digging that gravel. And as they continue to progress through the spawn, lay the eggs, that disease is transmitted to the eggs. And it doesn't take a scientist to figure out what happens next. I mean, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. So we have this population of wild browns. Sure, if you need your hero shot, whether it's to put on Instagram or make the cover of American Angler, or just to show your friends and your pissing match, you're still doing the fish a disservice, and you're doing us a disservice. And what's ultimately going to happen is, if that type of behavior continues and grows, we're going to be relying on a hatchery fishery, which for local state hatcheries, they think great. I'm sure they think, well, it's just more fish we got to produce, more jobs. Sounds good. But, for a guy like me who comes out here to target wild fish in the summertime, especially on dry flies, the rest of the year, you got to keep into account that you got to let them do their thing so they can make it to that point in the summer to connect that moment with you when they come up and eat your big foam bug, which doesn't happen in a lot of the rest of the country. Here in the West, we have some of the best dry fly fishing there is, as far as I'm concerned. Even if they are hatchery fish, which a lot of our rainbows are hatchery fish, to know that we have this population of browns that's sustaining, why would we want to hinder that natural reproduction? And fame, obviously, is what a lot of people's argument is, or they're not their argument, but, and let's face it, that's why they want to do it. I see too often where you see these guys showing up, and you could tell the rigs they show up there, some sort of sponsored big shot. When they're floating in the boat, you see them just kind of floating down the middle of the river. Their bow is, going from left to right. They're holding no line in particular. And you can tell they just don't know what they're doing. And these are the times when I pull over and I just tell my guys, hey, let's just take a breather, get a drink. These guys don't know what they're doing, and I'm sure it's not going to show them what we're doing here, because that spot up there that I keep rowing up to is producing a fish every time, and they just floated right over it. But when those guys get to some shallow, ankle-deep water, man, they line up, and they got their heavy dredge rigs on, and it's only a foot or two deep, but they got plenty of weight on to make sure that fly is down. And, you see him really get at it. And time again, just like Mr. Duke, I saw him floated by him. I saw that exact little Howler Brothers outfit he had on. I thought, man, I'm probably going to see that guy on Instagram. Well, before I seen him on Instagram, I seen him get busted by the Game and Fish at the end of the day in the closed section, which you can't miss. It's closed. I mean, you can't. There's signs everywhere. I'm down there every fall. You can't miss that. I thought, man, he's probably going to be one of those guys. And sure enough, it popped up on American Angler, which is a magazine or a publication that I always enjoyed reading. But this is something you see all the time. You see guys on spots where fish are spawning and you say, gosh dang it, I feel sorry for those poor fish. For a guy like me, I'm out there back rowing the big runs, staying out in the wind typically because the wind blows in Wyoming all the time, and keeping my dudes in the boat. Whereas for me, it could be a hell of a lot easier just to plant my dudes on a gravel bar and give them an egg and a worm and say, get to town. You see all those fish right there? Get at it. This is my backyard here. I've been at it for 17 years here in Wyoming. I don't have a fishing club that's built my clientele. I don't have a trust fund. I lived in a leaky camper for multiple seasons, being a legitimate trout bum, just knowing that one day I'm going to get to where I'm at. So now it's funny to see all these people on Instagram with all their swag and all their sweet gear and nice, pretty new hats. And, they call themselves the Montana trout bum or the Colorado trout bum. No, that's a bunch of baloney. Because I've been there. I know what a trout bum is, and bums are poor. People see that in you. It's not like you're out there with all this, these Thomas & Thomas Sage rods and nice apparel. I mean, you're a ragged looking dude. But I think this day a trout bum has a different definition than what it did back then. Maybe that's just my opinion.
I know the term BroStaff on Instagram is 90% fishing, and then there's someone with tennis rackets. But the only people that tag themselves BroStaff are Instagram people.
Yeah.
That fish.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting turn of events in the last decade. What's been happening on social media, and it's like, I'm not going to say this guy's name, but he's got 17,000 followers, and I just saw he followed me yesterday, and I thought, man, who are you? How do you have these many followers? Because these are just little 12-inch fish. You're not doing anything special. Oh, you got a fish you plucked off a red there. 400 likes, 1,000 likes. I don't get it. That's a whole different world out there. And, fortunately for me, I just kind of hole up out here in Wyoming or wherever I'm fishing and keep my nose down, and it's worked out really good. I can't complain. It's been a lot of fun. I forget I'm working every day, and being able to take clients that I've fished with for years on end out here in the American West, being able to take them internationally. Again, no yellow dog or sweetwater has helped me out here, but to be able to build something and grow on it and take those guys into places where, you forget where you are. When we were in the Bolivian Amazon last October, we were way back in there. When I guided in Mongolia, we were way back in there, but when we were in that Amazon, I've never felt that remote in my life. There was no road around for days on end. Mongolia, you at least got 2 tracks here and there. To get to that point, and then to see these people call themselves BroStaffers, and then you see them fish, and that's the biggest joke about it all, and then you realize it's all just a big joke, and that's why you just stick to your guns and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I have an issue with people that just brag about all their BroStaff and sponsorships, that they're known for that, but not known for their craft or talent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's their resume is straight up, hey, I'm a BroStaffer, so I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Versus I'm extremely talented and I share my knowledge and I help others and I clean up the environment.
Yeah. And I'm trying to get something going here. Like I talked about the guide legislation, I don't want to see more legislation, but something needs to be done if we want to preserve the experience we have out here. That's what people come out here to do. They come out here to, whether it's Montana, although Montana's getting pretty busy, but the American West provides an experience that goes unmatched around the rest of the country in terms of trout fishing. And for me, I see it as if nothing is done, it's, we're going to turn into a place where we're seeing 20, 30 boats a day. And that's not why I'm here. So, I try to do things around here locally, although it's tough being an entrepreneur and a family man, keeping on top of everything. There's people that are passionate about it and it shows. And there's people like you're talking about, the BroStaffers that,
you cut out for a second.
I just BroStaffers.
Right.
BroStaffers are in there for, the fame and glory, and I get it. People want that, but at the same time, it's like, why do we fish here to begin with? What got you fishing years ago? It's because it's fun, and you like to share that experience with people. And now guys go out and catch one big fish, and they see all the likes they get, and they say, well, that was kind of cool, and they get this free stuff, and well, fair enough, but you still can't fish.
Right. And the subject of preservation, these trout are spawning in the same spots annually, correct?
Yep.
So people are they going from red to red to red on their float down? Like they've already got them mapped out. They know where they're going to go snag a spawning fish.
Well, I wouldn't say they're going to go from red to red. They're going to fish the places in between those. Whether or not they're catching fish in there or not is a different story. And that's the water that I target. Because I know those are all fish that, in another term, are kept on ice for me, because I know most of the time these guys, they're putting their boat right over top the fish. And, that's an easy, whenever you see those guys floating, that's typically, they're, and I'll even tell my guys I'm taking fishing for the day. I say, you see that spot where we're even getting those fish? Now watch this boat. We're going to pull over and just see where they float, see where they're fishing. And, of course, most guys, they got to be throwing their big streamers. And, they're just floating down the middle of the river and just seeing how far they can throw their freaking loop that's 20 to 30 feet wide and and throw that big streamer just so they can say they're hucking meat as a BroStaffer, which fine, fair enough, but every year our biggest fish come off nymphs. Last year the biggest fish I got personally on my day off was a 27-inch brown, and I let my dude go through there throwing streamers, caught a bunch of little cutties. I came through behind him, played cleanup, 27-inch brown on a turd. So if you like to go cast your arm off, that's fine. If it makes you feel cool, streamer fishing's fun. I love it. It's good right now. I was throwing streamers all last week. It was a lot of fun, but at the same time, there's a fine line of just, these guys are just strictly, hucking meat,
with their $15 fly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, it's fun. A lot of these guys tie flies. Again, I've been tying flies commercially since I was 13. It's fun tying big streamers, and it's fun watching fish come out and eat them.
It's not the most practical.
No. I like to work smarter, not harder.
Right. Now, what about people that like to brag about this? Let's say Facebook Ronnie, who most of the negative things about him have seemed to be scrubbed on the internet, and he appears to be a full-time guide in the South Holston area now.
Yeah. He's back. Can't believe it.
Yeah, he beat the haters and isn't posting about standing over a red all night with a headlamp with a fish on the stringer.
Yeah. Well, I think guys like that always find support somewhere. This is a very diverse country. There's a lot of different people out there. It's like with this incident about the American Angler article, I'm blown away that people still support somebody like that. I mean, I got buddies that do stuff like that, and you're still buddies with them, but you say, hey, man, what? That was kind of stupid, huh? I mean, that was 5 cracks in one day. Why can't you just stick to one? So it's, again, only thing I can chalk that up is there's a lot of people there's a lot of different people, again, in this country. And perhaps old Ronnie, he's got guys that feel the same way as he does. And I know he's come all apologetic and did the South Park, I'm sorry. That guy didn't quit what he's doing. I'm sure he just being a little more selective on what he posts.
What was the reception from your article, which was in 2018, and it was all over Facebook last week? Somebody must have seen it and posted it, and it just got shared and shared. And what are you drinking there? I've just got a plain Coke, empty Coke. What are you libating on?
I got this Bloody Mary recipe dialed, so it's what I do when I smoke meat, or fish, I should say. But yeah, I'm still getting emails about folks reaching out to me. It's funny, you reached out here the other day, and prior to that, I had a guy who's been doing a fly fishing school in Australia for the last 30 years reached out, and when it first happened, it was overwhelming. All positive support. Had a couple folks that kind of said, "Oh, you're just jealous," blah blah. It's like, all right, so how am I jealous? Because I don't have to work for anybody. I have my own operation. It's a killer operation. Got a ton of private water I get on, and I'm my own boss. So unlike, we'll use old Duke as an example. I don't have an outfitter to bow to or a boss to bow to. I've got great clients that are great friends at this point. And further, like I mentioned earlier, doing destination trips, I don't have to have somebody set it up for me. I think it was David Leak. Who's that guy? He's Duke's buddy. He runs, is it Yellow Dog or Sweetwater? One of those. Ian? That Duke goes out with on the hosted trips. And the guy's name's David Leake or Leake. He was one that got on me on Facebook saying I, destroyed this young man's career. And that was the other thing is I was told, why didn't you reach out to him? Well, we did. The guy that publishes or that runs the newspaper that I published the article under, we reached out to Patrick and he said we were full of shit. It's like, okay, well, wrong. And so that's one thing I've been met with is people say, well, you're jealous, this and that. Well, first off, no, I got a killer operation. I catch bigger fish than that aren't spawning, and half the time they need to dry fly. And when I go take trips places, I set the trip up. I am the booking agent, whereas I don't refer to a company to set it up for me. So, and the other thing was that I had this gripe for Mr. Duke that this was a thing between two guides. Never met him, don't know him. He's probably a fun guy to be with. I'm sure he is. Since that article's been put out, I've fished with a few guys that have hosted trips with him, and they're great guys. And I'm sure Pat is just the same as those guys. However, in this particular situation, when you go to a different piece of water that's not your home water and you do this and the locals see what you're doing, you do what you did. It's like, well, you kind of set yourself up here to be exposed. And, I've been trying to put an article together like this for years, but I never had the right example. And this was just beyond a perfect example.
Do you think it affected people becoming pro and then BroStaffs in the industry? Or do you think this was just kind of a blip on the radar? People took notice, but it didn't punish anybody for doing unethical things with fish or while fishing and getting free stuff?
I think it's just a blip. Unfortunately, this country's so big and fly fishing's become so popular that, just a blip. It's interesting to hear people still talking about it, but I still see guys doing what they do come spawning time. And, I try to be as nice as I can about it until they just tell me to go pound sand. And it's like, all right, man, well, these fish, I see them every day when I'm on the water. You're just up here for the weekend and, but fishing spawners, it's not an illegal tactic. So it's just one of those things. You just got to bite your tongue and say, well, all right, guys, let's just head on down to this next run and see what we got.
Do you know if Ryan was picked up by anybody since he lost I think it was his rod sponsorship, maybe? Think he's got someone else to pick him up and give him some free sticks?
I don't know. You're talking Patrick, right? I think
yes.
Ryan. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I've seen, through the Instagram feed, I see him and other guys, the same crew of people on hosted trips. And I, kind of going back to what you're saying, it's like, wow, there's still people that would support somebody like that. I mean, I didn't come out bashing and slandering the guy. I was just truthful, like this, anybody on their home fishery, if this would have came and done this, if somebody would have came and did this on some guy's home fishery, anybody in their right mind would want to do exactly what I did, especially on a fishery like what we have here, where it's all wild fish and their numbers are down. And there's such a high chance of them dying after you do something like that. I mean, come spawn time, especially October in the fall, my boat does not catch many brown trout. And I got so many people that say, well, that brown trout run. And I say, look, man, we're going to nymph the runs and I'll have a dry fly rod rigged up with an adult and a cripple Baetis. And we'll look for sippers. October, November, do not see many browns at all. And I'm honest with people on that. It's because I don't fish around gravel. Oh, well, it was caught off with a drop behind the gravel, and those aren't spawners. Nah, no, that's typically during the daylight. That's where the big fish is sitting, who have been hustling that red all night. So now what I'm starting to see is a lot of these big browns being posted in October or November at night. Huh. Okay. Well, who wants to go fishing at night when it's cold? Not a lot of people, unless you know there's going to be a 25, 30-inch fish getting up, where you can put your light on him and he's not going to move. During the daytime, they're extremely skittish. But nighttime, nah, man, they're out there doing what they're going to do.
Right.
Yeah. So during the day, they move back into the drop and they just hunker down and rest and get ready for the next night of sending it, So that's that whole statement. Well, the drop behind the red, come on, really? And for me, I'll even have guys that say, well, can we just fish the drop behind the red? No, man, let's just wait. And there's times, I'm not impervious to accidentally hitting fish behind gravel. Every year I see reds in new spots, whether it's been here on the green, been on the Bighorn in college, or the Platte in college. There's your traditional reds, and then, the next year comes by, and after the high water comes in, there's gravel. There's a little gravel hump that washed up in some spot, and there's all of a sudden this year there's fish spawning on it. It's a really neat thing to witness. So as you're floating through and all this, and there's a lot of times we'll find fish in 4 to 6 feet of water spawning, especially on the North Platte on that Gray Reef section. There's times you come through and you pick a fish up and you say, oh man, this, it's milking, and you kind of thinking as you're drifting, oh man, that's kind of a tan spot there, even though it's like 4 or 5 feet deep, it's fast water, but at that point, you're just noticing as you're coming through at the time, and that's typically during the high water cutty, when the cutties are spawning. The rainbows are pretty easy to see, as well as the browns, but cutties is a time when I find myself just accidentally picking up fish that I'm fairly certain are spawning, because the water's up and moving, and in our rivers the cutties are, especially the tailwater, they're forced to stay in the main stem. They can't go up any tributaries because there are none. So there's times there where I pick up cutties and think, oh man, that fish I'm pretty sure that thing was spawning, but just know next time not to run that line, just pull it over 10 feet or run to the other side of the river. That's why it's called fishing and not catching them. But it's one thing to accidentally do it, but to go out there and just stand on spawners all day, it's a whole different ball game.
And what about doing that all day, getting the picture, and then for a major publication to put it out there? I would not have looked at that trout's lower lobe of the tail published in American Angler if you had not pointed it out. Maybe because I'm not as much of a trout angler. I don't see browns during the spawning season.
Yeah, and that's something a few, even forget the guy's name, the editor of American Angler at the time, he had said he didn't even see it. But for me, it's dealing with the spawn. It didn't start here on the green. This was something in college when I was on Gray Reef and the Miracle Mile. We were told by the outfit I worked for, you don't fish spawners. You just don't. There's plenty of other fish in the river. You can just as easily have a 40 fish day and not fish spawners. And so this was something, even though I was trying to learn in college, when I was physically in class, which I didn't really learn much of anything, it seems, that was one thing I took from college, was I could, I understood the importance of leaving wild fish alone. Because when I was a kid in Missouri, I would go and fish these little small Ozark streams, and, they were not full, but there was small wild rainbows in there. And of course, the Missouri Department of Conservation stocks hatchery fish all over the state. Those are easy to catch, but at an early age, I was able to develop the appreciation for wild fish and what they represented. And so I'd go out on these little creeks, whether it was Mill Creek, the Little Piney, the Current. You'd catch your little 5, 6, 10, just 10-incher would be a big fish there, or big for me as a 13, 14-year-old that ate the fly that I created or tried to mimic off of a magazine I saw. And so as an early age, I started to really appreciate wild fish because they're much more beautiful than the hatchery fish. And there was just something there that really drew me to it. So fast forward, I get out here and I get in college, and I've been guiding for a couple of years, and I start guiding on the North Platte there outside Alcova, to have that notion drilled into my head of, hey, you don't fish spawners. I instantly agreed with it, and I saw what it represented. This isn't a hoity-toity, sniffing my own farts type of thing. I mean, this is just something that, we as a collective, if we want wild fish to stay around, we probably need to let them go and not fish those fish. Now, to be truthful, the North Platte, there's so many freaking fish in that river. It's unbelievable. I mean, every year they get fish counts of 4,000 to 6,000, 7,000 fish a mile. Whereas over here on our river, below Fontenelle Dam, which mind you is a tailwater, we every year consistently, it seems that we cannot break 600-700 fish a mile. I mean, the river's full of crustaceans, full of aquatic insects, full of leeches, full of bait fish. But for some reason, we can't even break 1,000 fish per mile. Now, this is according to the Game and Fish. I believe last year they shocked, and they think it was about 600-700. And I actually helped shock a few years ago, and that year they determined it was about 670 a mile in certain stretches. That's not a lot of fish compared to the Fort Smith Bighorn, compared to the Madison, compared to the North Platte, compared to the Colorado, although I don't know what the Colorado's got, but I mean, all those other more famous Western tailwaters have significantly more fish than us. So, to be truthful, the North Platte could probably handle as much spawning pressure from anglers, or much pressure from anglers during the spawn as possible, and it'd probably be okay. On a river like this, like I said, I got out of college in Laramie, and I lived in a leaky camper, gave up a social life, gave up everything to just donate myself to fishing and this passion that now is my occupation. So there's kind of something deeply rooted there. And knowing that we have, again, 600 fish a mile over here versus 6,000 a mile. I mean, that's one whole zero less. That's a big number that zero represents, And so I started to develop that appreciation for those wild fish. And again, as a kid, I always thought they were great, but can't come out here. It all became full circle for me, and understanding that, hey, this is our future here. Now, granted, there's a lot of rainbows that are stocked in the river, and cutties as well, but a lot of natural recruitment amongst those two species. But again, the browns are 100% natural. Again, it was just being able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And once I got done with college, I thought, man, there's just absolutely no reason to mess with spawning fish. Absolutely. I mean, really, are you that much of an incompetent angler that you got to go and pluck a big fish off of gravel?
Yeah, it's like roofing a girl because you don't have game. There's ways to cheat.
Bingo. That's good.
Yeah,
that's really good.
Speaking of spawning, you've got a second kid coming.
I do. He is due the middle of July, or he or she is due the middle of July, and which we're very excited for. Mama is a fishing guide here at the Wyoming Fishing Company as well. Unfortunately, she will be out of the roster this year. But yeah, we've already had our youngest, little Eddie. We've had him out in the boat, and
is it spelled EDDY?
Yeah, it is actually.
That's awesome.
It's been fun. Unfortunately, we can't have Mom in the guide rotation this year, but there's always next year.
I think it's been 3 days since I had a bagel thrown at me by my 8-year-old, or thrown in my direction.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah, I had a bagel with cream cheese hucked at me or just a little piece of it, but it was hucked at me this morning. He's got an arm on him, which hopefully that translates to a good fly cast.
Your kid knows the difference between throwing something at their parent. Mine doesn't. I'm sorry, I should say that at least my kid is the age where she knows she's not supposed to be throwing things. Yours gets a pass. Yours is younger. So what else is someone going to see on a float with you? You mentioned some of the aquatic organisms underneath the water. What's flying around or walking up on the ground?
Well, out here it's kind of the high sage desert. You can see the Wind River Range off in the distance from most of the Green River, whether you're above or below Fontenelle Reservoir. which has our tallest peaks. Contrary to what a lot of people think, the Grand Teton in Jackson Hole is not the tallest peak in Wyoming. Gannett Peak is, and that is just north of where I'm standing right now, probably by about 15 or so miles. So you see the mountains around, but plenty of sage. Below the dam is a bit more of a desert. I kind of like to call it an oasis down there, because when you're down the river, it's kind of like a nice, lush little oasis. And, even down that far, one wouldn't think so, but you see quite a few moose, or locally known as swamp donkeys. Quite a bit of desert elk, too, although they're not very abundant, but there's definitely elk out in the desert below the dam there. And I've even seen a wolf down there. There's been wolf sightings.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Since the wolf reintroduction in Yellowstone a couple decades ago, there's they've expanded and traveled across Wyoming. And I think the last time I seen one down there was three or so years ago. It was pretty wild to see a big black animal with pointy ears and a big black tail, running out there in the sage. But they're definitely there. And then, of course, you got a plethora of birds. We're in quite the migration corridor of a lot of waterfowl. In the spring, we see some ibis coming through, lots of different ducks. One thing that the Green River Basin prides itself on is the sage grouse population, which this is kind of the core area for sage grouse in the American West. And, of course, they're the poster child of anti-natural gas extraction throughout here. But a lot of guys like to hunt them, and I've hunted them a few times. I'd prefer to tie flies with their feathers over eating them, I can tell you that.
I think they make one of the most interesting noises of all animals. Or maybe I'm thinking of prairie chickens.
Prairie chickens, too. They're very kind of similar to the sage grouse in what they do in their mating rituals. They get out and strut like turkeys. Yeah, the sage grouse, they'll puff up their necks. I don't know what they call them, but their necks get all puffy and their spiny tail fluffs, fans out like a strutting turkey. And it's pretty neat to witness that in the spring. Aside from that, golden eagles, bald eagles, osprey, you name it. There's just every sort of bird. And of course, we got some of the bigger herds of pronghorn antelope out here. We call them speed goats. And then also the Green River drainage is a huge migration corridor of mule deer throughout western Wyoming. And this is where we see some extremely large mule deer, pushing or exceeding the 200-inch class, which, is just a huge deer to really think about. Otters too, lots of those guys running around. And something we're seeing now, this goes back under the water, but kind of got a problem over here, and that is the invasive burbot, or the lingcod. They have been introduced on this side of the divide. And matter of fact, when I was floating the river 2-3 days ago, we counted, I think, 3 dead ones that got kind of pushed through the turbines at the dam. And I'm guessing that's what happened. They just get pushed through the turbines in the lake. And, they get anywhere from 15 to 30 plus inches long, and kind of some gnarly looking creatures. But they call them the poor man's. Yeah. But they call them the poor man's lobster, because it's pretty good eating white meat, especially if you're a real trout bum living off a trout, and you go to eat one of those things. You just say, man, I need to catch more of these guys.
Yeah, someone posted on Instagram last week that they caught one in Montana or Wyoming, and I was just like, I didn't think they were down there. But someone dumped them in.
Yeah, they went and got them. At least I was told they were transported from the Bighorn drainage and brought to Flaming Gorge and put in there. And Flaming Gorge, I mean, that's down south a little ways of us here, and they've made it through Fontenelle Dam all the way up into the Green and the New Fork River right here behind my house. The furthest I've caught them is just outside of LaBarge. They're nocturnal, so there's times, and this has happened on more than one occasion, where when the sun is high and you got good visibility from the boat looking down into the water, you can see them sleeping on the sand flats.
Cool.
And being that this side of the state, it's a mandatory kill on them, you can snag them legally. It's pretty fun to spot them on the sand flat sleeping, because you can go and anchor right next to them and stick the tip of your fishing pole down there, stick them with the rod, and just yank them right in the boat. And I mean, you're just harvesting at that point. There's no sport in it. But that's a promoted activity because they're invasive, and it's believed that they have an impact on our trout populations over here because they're such a predatory fish.
You got to come down to DC and see the snakehead snagging.
Yeah.
One of the most bizarre things, every 10 feet on the shoreline for about a mile will be some dude with a snagging rig.
Oh.
And then the snakeheads, they come up to breathe, and they're swimming along shore because they're lazy fish and there's least current. So they kind of just follow the shoreline. Yeah, and they come up to breathe, or they're in shallow waters, and these dudes just snag them. And we're talking 40-inch fish.
Jeez. That's big fish.
They're probably worth more on the black market than a burbot.
Big expensive fish, I suppose.
Yeah, they're worth like $90 on the black market in DC for one big
Really?
snakehead. Yeah. These guys are out there every day that I'm out there guiding for shad. Same dudes, same brock. They'll sit there and snag all day and then go home at dusk. It's like, it's their job now.
Wow. Invasives creating jobs. Interesting.
Yeah. We also accidentally foul hooked an invasive turtle last year.
Ooh.
It smelled. I used to work for the FDA, and I'd ride my bike through Georgetown in the summer, and I would ride past all these restaurants that had all their leftover seafood out all night in the heat. And that is the same smell of, where was I going? I just lost my train of thought.
Turtles.
Yeah. So that turtle smelled just like those dumpsters of shrimp chunks and whatever left over all night. The whole air around that turtle smelled. It was some kind of soft shell. I mean, my client, I think she had her nose covered. It was disgusting.
So how do those turtles get in there?
Asian grocery stores. Oh, there's aquariums that have who knows what. That's where I get my fly time material too, at those grocery stores.
Yeah.
I get my yarn there.
Yeah. Joanne Fabric. Great place.
This is Korean yarn.
Oh.
Yeah, and it makes the easiest woolly bugger. You just palmer it on. It's all synthetic, and you've got a little body. Yeah, no need for chenille if you're tying a bugger. I'll send you a picture of it. Korean scrub yarn.
Yeah, those definitely work out here, so I will take you up on that.
Yeah. Anything we forgot to go over with the article and ethical fishing, your life in Wyoming?
No, I think that covers it for now. I'm glad we were able to reconnect and talk about it, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in this industry. I've certainly seen a few articles come up since that have kind of not ridden off the tailcoat of it, picked up where I left off on my main point on what social media and these brand ambassadors are doing. And I mean, I'm anxious to ride again. I miss doing it. Unfortunately, my nose has been down, and any more these days, I see bad things going on. It's just like, guys, let's just focus on the fish here. But that day in October, it was hard to look away when all that happened, because even as I did boogie down river, when I came back up river, it was right in my face again. And I thought, wow, okay, this is really happening. But we'll see what happens here in the future. Hopefully, some of these companies begin to, or
they have a responsibility.
Or at least just promote, ethical. Hey, quit trying to, be ethical. Quit trying to blow yourself up, because in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're probably going to have a real job, and this will all be water under the bridge. So don't promote being a dumbass.
That should be a bumper sticker.
Yeah, just be good. We're all here to catch wild fish. Bottom line, do we want to? I mean, do you and I and everybody else want to go out and bang fish off gravel and hinder any sort of natural recruitment these trout are going to do, or do we want to sustain what we have, because this is what brought us here? I mean, who wants fin clipped fish? Who wants fish with no dorsal fins, or clipped adipose, or, rubbed off pectorals, or, rounded off noses because they kept running into the cement walls at the hatchery? No, we want big, beautiful wild fish.
Intact fish.
So we can talk about their spots, their colors, and what made that experience so great, because there's no denying the distinction between hatchery and wild fish and what type of experience each one provides. Hatchery fish are great, but everybody loves catching wild fish.
Indeed. All right, I got some random questions for you now.
Yeah.
Is there a good sandwich place in your desolate neck of the woods?
Yeah, there's Oboe's Market and Deli. The owner's a friend and a client of mine, and I think he makes the best food around. He's got a location here in Pinedale as well as one in Marbleton, which is about 25 minutes south. Man, other than that, that's about it. Got a few places to try. There's the Junction just up the road from here, but I prefer Oboe's quite a bit more.
All right. With all your international travel and you're fishing in one of the premier locations on earth for trout, do you have a favorite place you like to go that is just your ideal fishing location?
Other than where I live, tell you what, with those boys at Angling Frontiers, Patrick and Federico, those Jungle Dorado was that was a surreal experience. If you've never done it, I highly suggest doing it. Straight out of National Geographic. And these aren't little fish. I think the whole trip, we caught one fish that was under 25 inches. The bulk of them were in that 10 to, I don't think I caught any 20 pounders, but double-digit fish. And there was usually, they'd hunt in packs. So whenever you'd see one, you'd see 6 to 10 or 20 more, and they're all big, and they're all typically headed your way because you're working upriver, they're working downriver, pushing the sow below to the tail out of the run. And then it hits the fan as they start eating the sow below, and it's just goes unmatched. I mean, steelhead on the swing is magical. Unfortunately, here in the States, it's kind of got a grim situation right now. Mongolian taimen is awesome, especially when a 40, 50-inch fish comes up and crashes, pretty much a bass popper or a gurgler. But that jungle experience, and this isn't marsh fishing, this was in the jungle. It's pretty darn cool. Gives me goosebumps talking about it right now.
So if you had a Groundhog Day where you woke up to fish the same location over and over, would it be down there?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. I do enjoy my surface fishing. Down there it's sight fishing, but you're fishing a big streamer and throwing a 9-weight, which is a lot of fun, but doing that day in and day out, maybe I just haven't had the privilege to do that all the time. I mean, we're fishing 5 and 6 weights here, but I'd say if it wasn't there, it'd be a couple little spots around here, little off the grid spots that will most likely never make it to the internet.
That's a good thing.
Either one of those two.
All right. If you could choose a superhero's powers to make you a better angler, what would you choose?
I'd probably just say Superman, so I can strap my cape on and fly wherever I want to that morning and go fishing.
Heck yeah. What innovation in the last, say, decade in fly fishing of some kind of modern technology can you not live without now?
Well, being that I'm a guide on a Western tailwater, I'm going to catch a lot of crap for it, but man, the thingamabobber.
I thought if you had said White Claw, I would have been like, Thingamabobbers.
Not a thingamabobber. That thing really just makes your day a lot easier, especially when the wind's howling 20, 25 all day. And, here in Wyoming, a lot of the land is private, which means the river is private, so you can't be dropping anchor. You can't get out and fix up everything. So you can't get out and comb out your yarny and gink it back up again. A lot of times you're just rowing over into an eddy and sit there and hopefully get everything dialed in before the wind blows you right back out into the run.
Do you have a size or color preference?
No, well, that third size up, not the real big one. It's not the little one, not the medium sized one, but the great big one.
Goldilocks.
That's for my dude fishing days. I'd say as far as something else that that I couldn't live without, probably, sink tip. These sink tips are pretty good these days, and they seem to be getting better. But that's just what I'm fishing if I'm going to be throwing streamers. But again, as I said earlier, I'm not against nymphing. It usually catches my biggest fish annually. So thingamabobber just makes it a lot easier, and gets the job done.
Are there any urban legends out where you live?
I don't know if this is a legend. I know it's fact, but there's a spot on the river we float by every day, right across from Slate Creek, where one of the landowners there, he was putting in, this was 2 years ago, he's putting in a par 3 golf course, and this is out in the middle of nowhere. Putting in a par 3 golf course on his property, and I'd float by every so often, and I'd see a guy in a bulldozer out there pushing dirt around, and I noticed he quit one day, and a few months go by, and I run into the BLM guy, and the BLM guy tells me that they quit because they found a skeleton under this little cliff that they were trying to plow over that was dated 6,000 years old.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Old
for me is the 1960s. I grew up in a town that wasn't built, or it's not really a town, but I grew up in a house that was built in like 72.
Mm-hmm.
So that thousands of years old boggles my mind.
Yeah, they found it. It was curled up in a fetal position, just under just a little slight rock outcropping, and they assumed that the nomadic traveler was moving through, and a storm hit, so it sought shelter under this little outcropping, and then a little bit of snow, or apparently a lot of snow, sloughed off, and as it was sleeping in a fetal position, just buried it right there, and bang, wow. 6,000 years later, we find it. Coincidentally, that spot, we named it the Skeleton Corner, but that spot, the biggest fish I've boated while guiding was there. I've hooked 2 more fish that were bigger than that, and the biggest fish that we got there was just a little over 28 inches, a great big old brown trout. But I know several guys that have gotten their biggest fish in that corner, and I've always felt that there was something magical about that corner. And hearing that story was kind of seals the deal for it. So every time I float by, matter of fact, I floated by it 3 times last week.
Ed McMahon would say that's wild stuff. It's wild.
It's wild.
That's pretty crazy. Let's see. What's something that you used to carry with you when you fished a lot, guided at the beginning, and then just realized, I just don't need that anymore. My life's much easier not hauling X around.
Well, making sure you don't. Well, I used to be fairly fond of certain hats anymore these days, as long as it keeps the sun off of me. That's good enough. But man, something I used to haul around all the time. Oh man, out here, any guided trip I go on, I've got a dry fly rod, a nymph rod, and a streamer rod set up. And that streamer rod, I've got another spool with a different line, whether it's an intermediate or a heavier sink tip, ready to be put on it. So, you kind of have to be fairly ingenuitous out here, or resourceful. So I kind of roll around with a lot of stuff, unfortunately. So that's a tough one. I don't know if I can answer that one right now.
If you only had one type of bird to tie with for the rest of your life, which bird would you choose?
Hungarian partridge.
Nice. Never purchased one of those online. That has to be always purchased in person. I ordered one online, and I was thoroughly not pleased.
Well, fortunately, we got them around here.
Did you shoot them?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yep. So it's, I actually just replenished my Hun stash. Just this winter. But in running out of Hun stuff, I was able to, I hunt quite a few ducks locally. And if you really pick every feather off of them ducks, you can typically find the soft hackle you're looking for. Now, granted, Huns, you don't tie dry flies with the Hun hackle, but I think a soft hackle is tough to beat. That'll catch fish all the time. Now, I'd like to say, grizzly, gold medal, grizzly neck, rooster neck. You don't always get the opportunity to throw dry flies as much as you want. So, but I would say, as far as a bird, I think if a guy was to just have a whole rooster You know, you got everything from the schlappen all the way up wings to his beak. You can probably tie about everything you want. So I take that back. We'll put Hun number second, big rooster. Right. Full thing though, schlappen to beak.
I'm looking out my window right now, and it's still midwinter, and everything's in bloom, and the birds are starting to nest. What are you looking forward to in springtime? And is there something that always signifies the start of spring?
Man, we live at 7,200 feet here. Right now I got just shy of 2 feet of snow in my yard.
This is going to be the first February with no snow in the DC metro area in 43 years.
That's crazy. I mean, we haven't gotten to the negative 40 stuff here this year, but I mean, it's just been in the negatives for so long here. What I look forward to is, you know, I'll take some snow, but a little bit of mild April temps so we can actually throw some Betas adults. Betas hatch hasn't been as great as it had been about 5-6 years ago, at least for me. I remember a few years ago, we had some pretty good surface fishing days, you know, mid to late April, where we'd spend most of the afternoon just head hunting with, you know, a cripple or just a dun. But yeah, I'm hoping we get just a little bit milder spring so we can actually fish dries and not deal with wind and you know, little mayflies that get blown 50 miles east before noon, you know, because that's what happens. That wind picks up and those little sailboats, they're blown clear to Wamsutter from here, which Wamsutter's a good ways away out in the middle of the Red Desert. That's kind of the joke we got. So
where can listeners follow you on any social medias? How can they hire you to take them out fishing, and anything else they need to find you online with?
It's pretty simple. Google search, Wyoming Fishing Company. You know, we're the original fishing company around these parts. That's what we do. I'm almost to the point now to where I don't have to rely on guiding a couple snowmobile trips or seeding clouds, which that's the other thing I do in the winter part-time is I work for a company as a field tech as well as a generator operator, seeding clouds as they approach the Wind River Range. So we try to enhance the snowfall as they go up into the Wind River Mountains so the snow can be stored there into the summer and then shipped down the Green River, which goes into the Colorado, which eventually feeds people, you know, or sends that water to Arizona, Nevada, and California. You know, Wyoming Fishing Company is the company I'm at. Website is wyofishco.com. That's wyofishco.com. You can find that same name on Instagram as well as Facebook. And that's about as far as I can go on social media because the rest just seems to get a little too complicated. But yeah, just Wyoming Fishing Company. That's us.
All right. Well, super. Mr. Ryan Hudson, I appreciate. Hopefully this one has audio recording for both ends. Unlike last time.
Yes, sir.
All right, dude. Well, thank you so much for your time and good luck with the kid on the way.
You bet. Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for joining us for the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. For more information or to contact Rob, please go to www.robsnowhite.com. This podcast is brought to you by Freestone Productions at freestoneproductions.com.